we have a lot going on for our meeting, so I want to get going. But let me introduce myself. I'm Rabbi Devorah Lynn. I co-founded Jewish Earth Alliance with Mirla Goldsmith in 2019. And we did start out at the Capitol, walking the halls of the Capitol in Washington, D.C., but then the pandemic ensued and everything was shut down, and we got on Zoom, and that helped us do this coast-to-coast gathering every single month. If this is your first time, we welcome you and hope that you will join us in our work and continue to join us every month for our meetings and our 2 lobby days in the year. So if you're just signing on, please sign into the chat where you're from and an organization you're attached to. And if you're new to Jewish Earth Alliance, let us know. Or if you've lobbied a lot before us, let us know that too. We're always inspired by our devoted members. So tonight's agenda, we will start with a spiritual reflection to open the meeting, and then we will have our guest speaker on getting out the environmental vote, and we will conclude with our action and come back for a blessing. So that's the run of the show, as we call it. We always start our meetings with a reflection from a spiritual leader. And I would like to give the mic to my co-founder, Dr. Mirla Goldsmith, to introduce our inspiration tonight.
So it's my honor tonight to introduce Imam Saffet Catovic, a leading voice for environmental action in the Muslim community. Before I go on to tell you a little bit about him, I just want to say that that I know everyone joins me in expressing our outrage about the horrendous attack on the mosque in San Diego yesterday, and to say that we stand beside you in solidarity with the Muslim community and working together for an America where all of us can be safe. Imam Catovic is a Green Faith Muslim Fellow. He co-founded the Green Muslims of New Jersey and was a founding member of the Global Muslim Climate Network. Wherever people of different faiths are joining together on behalf of environmental justice, Imam Catovic is there, and I can tell you that from my personal experience. He's contributed his expertise and energy to the Parliament of the World's Religions and the statewide Clergy Council of Faith in New Jersey, among many other organizations. For his day job, he is the director for UN operations at Justice for All, a human rights organization that advocates for the rights of Muslim minorities around the world. We invited Imam Catovic to address us tonight because he is a leader of the Covenant for Our Future campaign. This campaign is mobilizing people across faiths to speak out for policies that reflect our shared values: feeding the hungry, healing the sick, treating migrants with dignity, and protecting the environment. We're calling on our elected leaders to repeal H.R. 1, known as the One Big Beautiful Act, and replace it with legislation that embodies moral responsibility and respects human dignity. When Imam Catovic is finished speaking, I encourage all of you who are here tonight to click on the link in the chat to learn more and to sign the covenant. Now it's my honor to introduce Imam Catovic.
Okay, I think I'm with you.
Yes, you are.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Mirla, for those wonderful words, and for the blessings of our work together and walking together to protect Mother Earth and all of her inhabitants, of which we are just one of the many, many species and inhabitants of Mother Earth. We pray blessings on this gathering, and thank you for the grounding that had taken place. It's wonderful to be with all of you this evening, and I wish I could stay for the whole program and the whole webinar, but unfortunately I am called to another program that I was not able to wiggle out of, so please forgive me for that in advance. My dear Jewish siblings, in faith and in covenant, I'd like to begin with the name of God, most gracious, most beneficial, and in the Muslim tradition, in the Arabic language. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. Let me begin with a brief but heavy acknowledgement. I thank Mirella for that recognition and for the words of kindness and solidarity that she has expressed. We are all deeply disturbed, but not surprised, by the attack on the Islamic Center of San Diego, where security guard Amin Abdullah, father of 8, gave his life protecting worshipers at prayer and students and teachers engaged in learning. Our hearts remain with his family and with the families of the other community members, Nadir Awad and Mansour Khazia, also known as Abu Is, who I used to run into regularly when I visited San Diego over the years. Both he and his wife had managed a store at the mosque for many, many years, and they were well known for providing hospitality and kind welcome to any guest who came to the mosque with traditional chai. We grieve with the entire San Diego Muslim community and beyond. This tragedy did not emerge in a vacuum. For months, we have watched public officials normalize anti-Muslim rhetoric. Most recently, Congress, and once again, words have consequences, was involved in this hate mongering. Hate speech, as all of you know, for it is indeed the driver of anti-Semitism as it is of Islamophobia, leads to hate crimes. And so I simply remind myself and all of us of a pledge that we took here in New Jersey back in 2015 and 2016. I had the honor of working with rabbis and imams and ministers from various traditions in crafting that simple pledge. Initially, it was amongst our faith leaders, and then we also were able to get the state assembly and the state senate to take the pledge. So I'll share it with you, and if you're so inclined, you can listen with me or not, or as you feel. And basically, it's very simple. The pledge is this: while interacting with members of my own faith, ethnic or gender community, or with others, if I hear hateful comments from anyone about members of any other community, I pledge to stand up for the other and challenge bigotry in any form. I believe, dear friends, dear siblings, that pledge lives here tonight through all of us. But tonight we must go further, because tonight is not only about responding to a past harm, tonight is about building the covenant of our future together. What is the covenant? In the Arabic language, the term covenant loosely translates into two words usually, and that's the language of the revelation of the Quran. One is ahd, which means sacred promise, and the other is aqd. Aqd means to bind or to tie oneself. So it is not a vague hope or a ceremonial document. The covenant for our future is a sacred promise and a binding moral framework rooted in our respective faiths that declares 4 things. And I know that you're going to get into this in detail later during the program and during our gathering. First, that every human being possesses inherent dignity, bestowed not by government, but by God. In the Quranic terminology, karamna bani Adam, that is the dignity or the ennobling of the children of Adam and Hawa, Adam and Eve, our common human ancestors. We humans are all, in Islam's teachings, infused with the very same divine spirit. Not some of us, all of us. In the Jewish teachings, as I understand it, we are all created in the image of God, the same image, the same God, not some of us, all of us. And in the Christian tradition, we are all, not some of us, called the children of God. The second point is that harm to any vulnerable community is a harm to all of us. The third point, that we will not bless as peoples of faith, as leaders of faith traditions, as believers, we will not bless or remain silent before policies that crush the poor, the sick, the migrant, or the oppressed. We must be, in the Islamic tradition, the term used is shahid, or shuhada in plural, witnesses, public witnesses as to the harms and wrongs. And fourth, that we hold our elected officials as well as candidates for office accountable. not with empty slogans, but with the full moral weight of our traditions. The covenant, I believe, is inspired by various faiths and traditions, and the best of the faiths and traditions, much of which we share in common, some of which we differ on. From the Muslim tradition, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him's command, La darara wa la dirar, is central. No harm and no reciprocation of harm. I believe this echoes the Torah's teachings, and please forgive my mispronunciation of the Hebrew language, or please feel free to correct me. Sadak, sadak, terido. Justice, justice shall you pursue. My friends, myself and Mira have the blessing and honor to serve together on the steering committee of the Covenant for Our Future. We serve with other amazing faith leaders who have come together from many faiths and spiritual traditions and have examined legislation through the lens of the covenant. The legislation I'm speaking of is the HR 1, the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill. HR, and we must speak with moral clarity here, HR 1 does not eliminate harm, it deepens and exacerbates harm. It strips health care from vulnerable families. It cuts food assistance to children. It undermines protections for immigrants and refugees. It prioritizes corporate profits over human dignity and tax cuts for the wealthy over the care of the sick and the elderly. It harms our common home, Mother Earth, and all she provides for our existence and well-being. In the name of quote-unquote beauty, it actually delivers suffering. Our covenant demands that we ask one question, I believe, and one question only. Does this policy reduce harm or increase it? By that measure, HR 1 fails, full stop. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon us, and I speak from my tradition here, taught that the best of jihad, and by jihad he meant struggle, is the word of truth before a tyrannical ruler. But we extend that principle. The best of faithful witness is a word of truth before a harmful law, whether proposed by Democrats, Republicans, or independents. We are not partisans. We are people of covenant. So here is our charge that I share with you tonight. We will invite, and I hope we will invite and commit to invite, every elected official and candidate for office, be it local, county, state, or national, to read the covenant for our future. We will ask them to affirm it publicly, and we will tell them plainly, we are not a special interest lobby. We are peoples of faith, and we will not bless your harm. If you support HR 1 as written, dear elected official, dear congressman, our representative, you are opposing our covenant. And we will remember that at the ballot box, in our pulpits, and in our public witness. Now, let me be clear. I do not ask anyone to become Muslim. In fact, I ask you as my Jewish siblings from the respected traditions of Prophet Moses, of which Muslims honor as one of the mighty messengers of God, I ask you to become more deeply Jewish. When the Imam says, La darara, no harm, and the rabbi quotes, and once again, forgive my mispronunciation of the Hebrew, Lo taha moad el dahem echa, do not stand idly by the blood of your neighbor. And when the pastor cries, let justice roll down like waters, that is not confusion. That is chorus, the symphony of the divine. When we say the covenant is for our future, we mean the future of your children and mine, and our grandchildren and great-grandchildren. As the indigenous peoples of this land, Turtle Island, have taught us, upon the unceded land, and in the face of settler colonialism, including the ancestral land of the Lenape people where I reside here in New Jersey, we must think 7 generations forward. What will our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren say about us? For we do not so much as inherit from our predecessors as we borrow from our future generations. Will they ask whether we saw HR 1 harming the vulnerable and said and did nothing? Or will they ask whether we rose up, Jewish and Muslims together, and said, not in our name? We must also engage with the media. As Malcolm X, El-Hajj Malika Shabazz, noted civil rights leader and human rights leader, whose 101st anniversary is today, actually, acutely observed, the media can make the innocent guilty and the guilty innocent. They can make us love the oppressors and hate the oppressed. If we do not tell our own story through our op-eds, interviews, and press conferences, someone else will tell a story that serves the powerful, those who always leave people behind. Every action we take must include a media engagement mindset. And now, if you don't mind, I would like to conclude with a brief prayer, and that if you feel so inclined, you can open your hearts and your hands and minds in prayer. Oh God, Ya Rab, whom Muslims call Allah, and whom our Jewish siblings call Adonai, Elohim, the Eternal One. You are Al-Adl, the just. You are the judge of the heavens and all that is on the earth and within the earth, and you always do right. We have seen, dear Lord, HR1. We have counted the harms. Give us the courage to name them clearly and the wisdom to oppose them faithfully. Bind us together, Muslim, Christian, Jew, and peoples of other faiths and spiritual traditions, not despite our differences, but through them. Let our covenant for our future be stronger than our fear. Let our witness be louder than those who profit from division and causing toxic polarization. Dear Lord, guide our elected officials and candidates for public office. Soften the hearts of the powerful. And if they will not turn, then give us the strength to replace them with those who honor the dignity of every human being. We ask you, Ya Rabbana, our dear Lord, to whom is due all praise and glory, to receive this prayer, not as empty words, but as a beginning of our collective action. And let those who believe say, Amen. Amen.
Amen. Amen,
Amen.
brother and cousin. Thank you, Imam.
Amen.
I know that you have to run off, but I wanted to say we invited the Imam tonight because we greatly appreciate his taking a leadership role in the covenant for our future. In this campaign, people of many faiths are working together to raise a moral voice for action and call on politicians to renew our country's commitment to a safe, just, and prosperous future for all by repealing HR1. We will not stand idly by or be silent. I encourage all of you here tonight to click on the link in the chat to learn more and sign the covenant, please. It is my great honor tonight to introduce our guest speaker for tonight's briefing. I've been following his climate work for almost a decade now. Nathaniel Stinnett is the founder and executive director of the Environmental Voter Project. You can hear me okay, right? The volume is good. A nonpartisan, the Environmental Voter Project, a nonpartisan nonprofit using data and analytics and behavioral science to mobilize environmentalists to vote. Named one of 5 global climate visionaries by the New York Times in 2018 and dubbed the voting guru by Grist magazine. Stinnett is a frequent expert speaker on cutting-edge campaign techniques and the behavioral science behind getting people to vote. He has held a variety of senior leadership positions on U.S. Senate, congressional, state, and mayoral campaigns. And he sits on the board of advisors for MIT's Environmental Solutions Initiative. And of course, he lives in Boston with his wife and 2 children. Welcome, Nathaniel, to the Jewish Earth Alliance monthly briefing.
Well, thank you, Devorah. Thank you so much. And thank you, Mirala and Phyllis, for reaching out to invite me. And I know Louise and some other EVP volunteers are here. And it really is an honor to be a part of this. And I know the Imam had to leave, but wow, what a way to start this meeting. I'm going to spend just a few minutes, I'm going to limit it to 15 minutes, now 14 minutes, telling you about our work at the Environmental Voter Project as what I hope is a good lead in to more deeply understanding why, at this time in particular, people who care deeply about climate and the environment need to be working hard to build the political will to lead on climate and the environment, and in particular, reach out to your friends and neighbors to encourage them to be voting and be climate activists. So I'm going to quick run through a presentation. It's going to be about 14 minutes, and then we will have time for a quick Q&A. All right. In a nutshell, the work that we do at the Environmental Voter Project is we identify people who care deeply about climate and the environment who don't vote, and then we turn them into better voters. That's it. That's it. We find environmentalists who don't vote, and then we turn them into better voters. And not only is that unique, but I think it's important to drill down into quite why and how it's unique. What this means is we don't do stuff that most other environmental groups spend their time on. We don't lobby for particular policies, although boy is that important. We don't endorse candidates, although boy is supporting particular candidates important. We don't even try to convince people to care more about climate or the environment, although, yeah, that's important too. Instead, a good way to think of us is we're not even in the mind-changing or opinion-changing business at all. Instead, we are solely in the behavior-changing business. What we try to do with the Environmental Voter Project is bypass the hardest, messiest, most expensive part of politics, which is changing people's minds and opinions, and instead find the people who are already with us, the ones who care so much about climate or the environment that it's their top priority, yet they aren't voting. And then we can make a purely behavioral intervention just to turn them into better voters. Now, I want to be clear. This is obviously just one important piece of the work that all of us in the climate movement need to be doing. But I think Phyllis and Devora and Mirala thought it was particularly important to understand why this work is so important now and in some of the action items that you're doing, because you're focusing on civic engagement. Because the truth is, the climate movement needs a heck of a lot more of this. And here's why. We focus on this work at the Environmental Voter Project because there are a whole lot of environmentalists who aren't voting. Based on our research of voter files, there were 11.2 million already registered voters. They were already registered, who listed climate or the environment as their number one priority, and they just didn't cast a ballot in the 2024 general election. 11.2 million. And just to give you an idea of how this number breaks down in some really important swing states, in these 5 swing states you'll see here, the number of these already registered but non-voting super environmentalists was consistently larger than the margin of victory in 2024. And in Georgia, it was 4 times as large as Trump's margin of victory. Now, I see many of you shaking your heads like, I get it. I get this is frustrating, right? But what I'd like to suggest to you is that this is also an enormous opportunity, because we live at a moment in time when it's become almost impossible to change people's minds about anything, but particularly things having to do with climate and the environment. And what all of these non-voting environmentalists represent are people who don't need their minds changed. They are already with us. Instead, they just need their behavior changed. And I won't claim that's easy. Of course it's not easy. But it is easier than changing people's minds. And it's also cheaper, and it is testable. Because as many of you know, who you vote for may be secret, but whether you vote or not, that's public record. It's public record what elections you vote in and what elections you don't vote in. So we can test turnout messages and see what actually increases turnout in a way that we can't test persuasion messages to figure out whether we're changing people's minds. And so this is frustrating, I grant you, but also an enormous opportunity because we in the climate movement have so much latent political power sitting on the sidelines. And at the Environmental Voter Project, this is what we live day in, day out, just identifying these non-voting environmentalists and then figuring out how to mobilize them. So very briefly, I'm going to just fly through this because we're limited for time. I want a quick run through how we go about this work. And then I'm going to get to some of our results and then leave you with some tidbits of ways that you can have an impact and also ways that you can speak to people to hopefully make them more likely to vote. Our work is a 4-step process: identification, mobilization, habit reinforcement, and changing the electorate. Very, very briefly, and again, forgive me for breezing over this, but we will have a Q&A if you want to drill down into more detail on any of this. The first step: we obviously can't talk to all 320 million Americans and figure out which list climate is their top priority, right? But polling is too dull an instrument. We don't want to know which demographic groups care about climate. We want to get more precise than that. And so what we do is we work with data scientists and we build what's called predictive models. It's a very long, convoluted process, but briefly, what this involves is we will poll tens of thousands of people, ask people what their number one priority is, isolate the ones who say climate and the environment is, and then try to learn as much as we can about those people, and then start trying to find more people like them. And then we call those people and figure out if our assumptions are correct. And sometimes they're not, and sometimes they are. But it's a long iterative process, at the end of which we can assign a probabilistic score to every single individual in a state voter file, telling us from 0 to 100 how likely they are to not just care about climate or the environment, but literally list it as their number one priority over all other issues. And this is a frighteningly accurate process. At the end of it, we take the top 15%, the people who have at least an 85% likelihood of listing climate as their top priority, and we say, thank you very much, data scientists. We appreciate your help. We take that list and we send it out to their competitors. And we say, can you check their work by polling these people and asking them what their number one most important political priority is? And every time we've done that, at least 85% of the respondents off the top of their heads have said, oh, climate change, why do you ask? That's how precise these techniques are. And I say that not to brag, like I've got nothing to do with it. We aren't building these models. It's just sort of where this data science has progressed. So we're really, really precise at being able to target these environmentalists. And remember what I alluded to earlier. We don't need fancy data scientists to then tell us who votes and who doesn't vote. That's public record. So we can identify on an individual basis who these non-voting environmentalists are, and then we can go to step 2, mobilization. Because now we have the luxury of being completely agnostic with our messaging, right? Like, we no longer need to persuade these people to care about climate. They're already there. We don't need to educate them on issues. They're already there. We just need to get their rear ends out the door on election day. And so that means we can work with thousands of volunteers to canvass and call and mail these voters, and we also send them digital ads. But perhaps most importantly, we run randomized control trials, these special social science experiments that help us isolate which messages work best with which of these non-voting environmentalists, to do one thing and one thing only, and that is turn them into better voters. And I'm going to very briefly at the end of this share some tricks of the trade with you. Step 3, habit reinforcement. If you're trying to change people's habits, you don't need to be a behavioral scientist to guess that you can't just talk to them once every 2 years when there's a big, sexy federal election going on. You need to talk to them as often as possible. And so we take that very seriously. We're involved in federal, state, local, general, primary, special elections. We've already been involved in over 170 elections just this year. Not because all of them were important for climate policymaking. I freely admit many of them weren't, but rather because each single one of them was important for changing someone's behavior. The only way you turn a non-voter into a voter is to get them to vote in an election. So we don't ever want to miss one in the states where we work, because ultimately our goal is to change the electorate. We know that nothing motivates a politician more than the prospect of winning or losing an election. And so they always go where the votes are. Not because politicians are all bad people, but just because it's the brutal arithmetic of how democracy works. Like, you either go to where the votes are or you don't get to be a politician anymore. And so it's incumbent upon us to dramatically increase the number of climate voters who are showing up in as many elections as possible, because politicians know who votes and who doesn't vote. And you better believe they don't care about the priorities of non-voters. All right. As I mentioned, we work with volunteers to canvass, call, and send postcards to these voters. We as a staff do direct mail and digital ads. As I mentioned, our messaging doesn't even really talk about climate that much, because again, if you're just trying to change someone's behavior, what we've found is that little behavioral nudges, using things like peer pressure or trying to talk about aspects of people's personality that are really important to them, and then aligning that with the act of voting, tends to work best. And again, I'm going to give you some tidbits, some tricks of the trade at the end, but if this is something you want to drill down into more during the Q&A, I'd be happy to discuss some of our behavioral science with you. How do we know this works? As I mentioned, we run randomized control trials. Let's say we are in Pennsylvania, where I'm from, and I know Phyllis is from. And we identify 500,000 of these non-voting environmentalists there. What we do not do is immediately start messaging to all 500,000 of them. Instead, before we talk to a single one of them, we separate them into two groups, a treatment group and a control group. The treatment group, they're the one that gets all of our messaging. The control group, we set them aside and we never talk to them. Then the election happens. And now for the third time, I will remind you that whether you vote or not is public record. And so a few months after each election, voter files are updated and we can see how many of the low propensity environmental voters in our treatment group voted. These are the people we communicated with, and compare it to how many of them voted in that control group that we didn't communicate with. And as long as that initial separation process was truly random, and as long as the numbers of people are big enough that we can through various statistical calculations prove that the outcome wasn't due to random occurrence, what this enables us to do is isolate what our sole impact was on turnout while controlling for all other factors, while controlling for the weather and other campaigns and all of that. And what we have seen is we likely increase turnout in hundreds of elections each year, but likely isn't good enough for us. We really just care about what are the elections where we can prove what our impact was while controlling for all these outside variables. And in 2021, and 22, and 23, and 24, and 25, we have been solely responsible for increasing turnout among our target population by as much as 1.6 percentage points in presidential general elections, as much as 3.8 percentage points in other statewide general elections, and as much as 5.7 percentage points in local elections. And these numbers might not sound that big to some of you, but ask Kamala Harris how big a deal 1.6% is, and she'll tell you. These numbers are everything in this business. Very briefly, I know I've got only 2 minutes left. We measure our impact in a second way, and that's over the long term. What we do is whenever we communicate with one of these individuals, we tag them in our voter file as someone who was unlikely to vote, yet they cared deeply about the environment. And we track them over multiple elections until they become such consistent voters that we can't think of an election that they wouldn't be likely to vote in. And what we know now is that as of about 2 weeks ago, which was the last time we took this calculation, we've now spoken to over 14.5 million unique individual low propensity environmental voters since we launched now 10 years ago. And over 2.4 million of them have become such consistent voters that they voted in their most recent federal election, their most recent state election, and even their most recent local election. They have become super voters. And just to give you a sense of what that means in one state, we've helped turn over 31,000 of these low propensity environmentalists into super voters in Maine, a state that I think we all know is going to be really important in 5.5 months. What does a number like that mean in Maine? Well, 4 years ago, 680,000 cast ballots in the Maine midterm. We think it's going to be closer to 720,000 this year. And so that means before a single ballot is cast, we're pretty confident that 4.3% of the electorate is going to be there because we helped put them there. And they've got climate as their top priority. This is why this work that you're going to be doing is so important. So let me close by saying this year in the 21 states where we're active, we've identified 3.4 million of these already registered super environmentalists who have never voted in a midterm before. 3.4 million. It's a huge, huge number. And as you can see, in some of these individual states, the numbers are just enormous. They're just enormous. And so what can you do? Certainly talk to your friends about climate voting. And I know that's going to be one of your action items later this evening. 2, if you would like to volunteer with the Environmental Voter Project, boy, would we love to have you. Another benefit of all these randomized control trials is we never have to ask a volunteer to do anything that hasn't already been proven to increase turnout in a randomized control trial. And then finally, be loud and proud and public about being a climate voter. Take it from someone who lives behavioral science each day. All of your friends and peers look all around them each day at each other to try to figure out what is appropriate behavior. And it's not because we're callous or shallow, it's because we're a social species. We're always looking around for cues. And if everybody who knows you knows that you care about climate change, and so because of that you're a voter, that's a hell of a lot more powerful than the most rational argument you could come up with to vote. And I'll close with 3 tricks of the trade. When you are talking to these people, talk about why voting is important to who you are. You yourself talking to them. Don't presume to know what's important to them, but chances are what's important to you, like being a good member of your temple, or being a good neighbor, or being a good citizen, or being a good parent, or being a good friend, and tying that with voting, chances are your interlocutor is going to think that's important too. Second thing, leverage normative values like that. If you think that this friend you're talking to, if you think it's important for them to be a good father, well, again, make that connection. And then finally, leverage affiliations. As all of you know, oftentimes your faith tradition or where you live or other clubs you belong to are very important parts of your personality. And if you know they're important parts of other people's personality, well, equate that with why it's important to be a voter. And I know that sounds kind of manipulative, but like, guys, that's what changing people's behavior is. And so the only question is, are you going to say stuff that works or stuff that doesn't work? And we are a deeply social species, and we are always trying to project a persona to each other of who we are or how we want to be seen. And if you know someone wants to be thought of as a good Jew or a good friend or a good parent, for God's sake, equate that with voting. That's the best way to get them off their butts on election day. All right, I went 4 minutes over. I apologize, but we've still got some time for Q&A, I think.
But who's counting?
I always count. I always count.
You're always counting. Those numbers, I remember when I heard you first speak, what it was 8 or 10 years ago, those numbers are just shocking, shocking. So let's do something about it.
Yeah.
Let's see, over in the chat, put questions in the chat and put question before the word question so I can pinpoint those. This is a particularly Jewish question. How many of these voters did not vote because of the source, the troubles in the Middle East?
So it's a great question. And the honest answer is, Devorah, we don't know. Social scientists are very good at some things and very bad at other things. They're good at figuring out how to get people to do things. It's a lot harder to figure out why people don't do things. Really, the only way to get at something like that is to ask voters, hey, why aren't you voting? Or ask someone, why aren't you exercising? Or why aren't you eating healthy? And when you do that, something called social desirability bias comes into the equation, where people often give you dishonest answers. Sometimes they don't even know that they're being dishonest because they're trying to tell you what they think is the most socially acceptable excuse for not having done this thing that deep down they know they were supposed to do. So it's really hard to answer that. I can tell you that from the data I've seen, no more environmentalists gave that as a response, as a reason for not voting, than people who belong to other sort of typically progressive issue constituency groups. But that's not something, as you can probably tell from the timbre of my voice, that I have a lot of confidence about. What I do have confidence about is that most people, despite what they say, decide whether to vote or not based on some sort of rational cost-benefit analysis, but rather because they want to be or not be a particular type of person. And very few people will admit that, because we're all children of the Enlightenment and we want to be thought of as these like super smart, rational people. But the truth is, like Massachusetts, where I live, like everybody knows what the result is going to be in pretty much any election whenever we have one, up and down the ballot. Yet we keep on breaking turnout records. Not because we actually think there's going to be an impact from our vote, not because we don't want to support X or Y, but rather because we feel the need to be a certain type of person or be part of something. And that's what our work as activists is, to make more people feel that way.
That's where the peer pressure comes in. But actually, you've been working on this 7 or 8 years before this all started, intense trauma started in the Middle East. So
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And what we
And
do
the
know,
numbers were twice. I don't know how many you've converted in the 10 years you've been doing this, but I remember the numbers were twice as big, weren't they? 20 million?
They were. And part of that is due to us. And part of that, to be totally honest, is because there's been an enormous political shift in the opinions of young men. So if we had been having this conversation 4 years ago, I would tell you people who care the most about climate or the environment are young people. And certainly over the last 3-4 years, that has changed dramatically due to two things. One, young men have gotten very, very conservative. I should say due to three things. Young men getting conservative. Second, people not losing interest in climate and the environment, but rather a few other things just sort of leapfrogging it. I mean, there's no doubt we live in a time of polycrisis where like the whole world is on fire. And then the third thing is the number one age group that now lists climate or the environment as their top priority is people 65 and older. And that's not because everybody else is falling away other than young men. It's I mean, there is some very good research by Pew Research and others showing that people 65 and older are actually like getting more progressive. It's not that they're standing still and everybody else is moving to the right. They're actually getting more progressive and realizing how important the values they grew up with are to them in a way that maybe they didn't realize.
And legacy.
That's probably true.
Let's see. Marianne Grossman is asking, do you have a yard sign that says, I'm a climate voter? Or we are climate voters?
We don't have a yard sign, but Marianne, that is exactly what it ought to say. You're a good behavioral scientist, right?
Right. And Scott says, it wouldn't be so hard to make yourself.
It would.
We'll give you that homework.
And Scott, it would probably be more effective if it was handwritten rather than printed.
And Robert Katz says, can you identify some typical demographic characteristics of environmental non-voters?
Yes,
And then
but I'll say it's gotten a little messier lately. So again, if we had been having this conversation 4 years ago, I
Mm,
would have said, well, first of all, I would have given you the caveat that there are climate voters in every demographic group. But yes, of course, we can isolate trends. And I would have said, young people, people of color, lower income people. Simple as that. It's not that simple anymore. It's not that simple anymore. In part because of a lot of the weird things that happened in the presidential election a year and a half ago, where Latinos broke right, young men broke right. But there are still a few trends that I can bring up. First, there is an enormous gender gap. An enormous gender gap. Now, there's a gender gap in partisan politics, right? So for about 35 years, women have been more likely than men to vote Democrat or hold progressive values. And that has stayed within a pretty consistent band. Sometimes it's 14%, sometimes it's 8%, but it stayed pretty even. When we look at the people we identify as being climate first, whether they're voters or non voters, starting about, I'd say, 7 or 8 years ago, that was more of about a 20 percentage point split. And it has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, such that now it's about a
mm,
30% gender gap.
mm,
The second
mm,
demographic trend that I'll bring up,
mm,
that gender gap is at its largest among older people, so people 65 and older. And so that is, I mean, I would go so far as to say that the stereotype of like a suburban yuppie in a Prius wearing a Patagonia fleece is like your typical environmentalist. No, that's not it anymore. It's a
mm,
Latina grandmother in the Phoenix suburbs. Like,
mm,
if there was a stereotypical environmentalist,
mm,
that's who it would be. Now, again,
mm.
please take that with a grain of salt. These are trends that we recognize. I would never suggest that you use these trends on their own to identify people who are climate first. But yeah, those trends do
Wow.
hold pretty strongly.
Yeah, some big changes there. We could talk all night, and there's some really great questions, but my steering committee is going to jump on me. So we have to get to the action. We try to keep it to an hour. I keep saying it's impossible, but thank you so much, Nathaniel. This is such tremendous work. It seems incomprehensible, but the numbers tell the story, and you provide a way to change them. So please, activists, explore the link to the Environmental Voter Project and sign up now for that campaign, because the campaign season is in full swing already. We know there are all these primaries going on. So thank you. Thank you so much. It's really great to see you in person, not to meet you in person, but to see you in person.
Well,
And
someday.
and someday,
Yes. And
exactly.
thank you,
All right.
Devorah. And thank you to
You're
all of
welcome.
you. And anybody who still has questions, please feel free to email
Yes.
info@environmentalvoter.org.
Right. We'll put that in the chat. And if somebody could copy the chat, I should know how to do that, but I'm too busy taking notes and all. Thank you so much. Thank you, Nathaniel. All right. Wow. What a great speaker. What a great program, project. Now I turn the floor over to Dr. Phyllis Blumberg from Bala Kinwood, Pennsylvania, and Barack Gale from, is it Olympia or Olympic, Washington? Which is it? But they're both on our steering committee. What is it? What is it? Olympia or Olympic? Olympia. Good. Okay. So we've got coast to coast here to lead this evening's action. So please take it away.
Okay, I'm going to go really fast.
That's what they all say.
No, I'm going to try to catalyze individual actions so that you will be engaging in collective actions. Could we have the slides? Thanks. So, yep. The idea of reduce, reuse, and recycle was not enough. It's individual actions, while great, we need collective action. Next slide, please. So there's been some recent research that shows that while 75% or so of the people in America think that climate change is happening, when you ask the next question, what did you do to mobilize with collective action? Most people say no, they haven't done anything. And that's what Nathaniel was talking about, and that's what I want you to realize is that we need to get that orange group of people to be mobilized. Next slide, please. So this slide to me was really informative. When we think about the importance of individual actions, we've been told this from years. It's only 10% of what we can do to reduce emissions potential with individual actions. This comes from lots of data. What we really need are supportive infrastructure, policies, incentives, disincentives to make change. Individual actions don't have anything to do with infrastructure, policies, or incentives unless we start acting collectively and start talking about things that we all need to be doing. Next slide, please. And I'll be happy to elaborate on this further. So actions that we think we should be doing. This is what Jewish Earth Alliance is all about. We do a monthly advocacy issue, and we contact our representatives, and people say, why should you contact I come from Massachusetts, for example, and my representatives are always supportive of these issues. I come from California. Well, the truth is they need to hear from you to say that you appreciate their work, to support them. And also they can tell stories when they hear from you. They can say, my constituents say such and such. And then we hear from the people who say, my Congress people are worthless. They're so anti whatever we're saying. They need to hear from us because they need to understand that we have a different perspective. And I have been on enough of these meetings with people way out of my range in terms of, different states than where I live. And they've come around a little bit and they start thinking and asking questions. For example, the aide from Alabama last year said, a couple of lumber people in my state are now asking questions about solar power and about EVs. So we are making inroads. It's important for all of us to vote for climate champions. And I want to move to the next slide real quickly. So we as agents can talk to other people. We need to be messengers, and we can use our Jewish values. We can give people a sense of hope, and we can give them a feeling that we're doing something worthwhile. There's lots of research that shows why we are good agents for doing this, particularly talking to our Jewish neighbors and our Jewish friends in our community. Next slide, please. Oh, want to go back. Barak and I have been talking about this for quite a while, and he told me a story which was the most meaningful story that I couldn't believe how much impact one individual can have. So take it away, Barak.
So this isn't the most dramatic story I have, but Phyllis urged me to tell the most relevant story. This weekend, Sunday, we hosted a mini climate reality training in Olympia. And there were some 40 of these mini trainings across the country. And one woman came because a dear friend of hers, a fellow soccer mom, invited her. She wasn't a climate activist. She wasn't an environmental activist or really an activist at all. She was a busy mom, concerned about the future, worked at home, and she also wanted some connection and also wanted to make the world a little bit better. So it was interesting to me that after the meeting, my friend Sarah, who had invited her, said something to me that really struck me. She said, I wouldn't have come without bringing another person. And that just really hit me that may be our most important type of advocacy is recruiting somebody to join us. I don't think people get involved because of a white paper or because of an action briefing. They get involved because somebody that they trust that and like invites them, personally invites them. So, Phyllis, are we moving now into, did you want to say anything more, or can we move now into the breakouts?
I think what we ought to do is talk about actions that people can do, even though
Okay.
they may not have room for a
Oh,
breakout
yeah,
tonight.
please.
So our action tonight, just like our inspirational speaker, was a little bit different. In the past, we've always asked people to contact senators, to write public to write comments in public. Now we're asking you to talk to people you know, where this is a much more personalized action and this is a much more customized action. So you want to explain our action?
Yeah, so we're going to have breakouts of about 3 people, randomly broken out. And just please think about who might already be in your sphere, in your life, who you could invite to advocate together, and how you might gently invite them. So who is waiting for that invitation? So I don't know who's, Mirala, are you doing the breakouts? And we'll have, how much time? Probably 10 minutes, and we'll let you know before that's up. And then we'll come together,
I'm
and have and share a few insights.
Yeah, I know that this is a devoted group of activists and they will stay at least 10 minutes after the hour. So let's get going.
Okay, I'm going to create the breakout rooms right now.
And what's the question in the breakout one? What's the discussion? What's the conversation?
Who in your life might you contact to and invite to join you in this advocacy work? Whether it's coming to lobby day, coming to an action briefing, or getting out to vote.
So it's more important not to think of an individual in your group, but to be thinking of why are you asking that type of person? For example, Nathaniel raised, make a link with a parent. Many people say, I care about the future because of my kids or my grandkids. Or why would you ask somebody who's an angler who does fishing, what connection do you have with them? So think of groups, think way outside your box, and then think about some conversation starters. So once you brainstorm some types of people who you might want to call and speak to, think about conversation starters. So think about how you can get them motivated and engaged. We don't, it could be a coffee, it could be a telephone call or whatever, but what do you want to start that conversation with?
Okay, I'm going to open up the rooms now.